Did you ever feel like you're doing everything you're supposed to, but still feel behind at the end of the day? You get things done, stay busy, keep moving, and somehow it still feels like it's not enough. And most people assume that means they need to work harder, stay more disciplined, push a little more. But most of the time, that's not what's actually happening. What you're really dealing with is your work structure, how your workload, time, and expectations are organized. And when that structure isn't aligned with your capacity, even simple tasks feel harder than they should. We'll take a look at how to check this in a minute, but first, you need to see where this actually starts. So when this starts happening, most people try to fix it by pushing harder, work longer, stay focused, try to get ahead. And sometimes that works for a little while, but then the same feeling shows up again. And this is where it gets misread, because it doesn't feel like something is wrong. It comes across as there's just too much to do. And that's not the real issue. What's actually happening isn't just about how much work you have. It's about how that work is structured. Your time, your expectations, your workload, and whether any of it is aligned with what you can realistically sustain. And when that alignment is off, even productive days start to feel draining. Most people hear occupational wellness and think being productive, getting more done, managing their time better. And yes, those things matter. But that's not really what this is. Occupational wellness is how your work life is structured, how your responsibilities align with your capacity, and whether your work supports your ability to stay consistent. Once you look at it that way, something becomes really clear. It's not about how much you're doing. It's about how your work is organized around you. Because your work life isn't neutral. It's either helping you stay focused, consistent, and in control, or it's quietly creating pressure that just leads to stress, frustration, and mental fatigue. And structure is what keeps that system working. Without it, effort feels heavier than it should. When that system is working the way it should, this is where occupational wellness starts to show up. Not in a big dramatic way, but in how your work actually feels. When your work structure is supporting you, tasks feel manageable, your focus holds longer, you know what to work on and when. When something requires more effort, you handle it without feeling overwhelmed. And that's the part most people overlook. It's not about doing less, it's about working in a way that requires less strain. Now, compare that to when your system isn't supporting you. You feel rushed, you feel behind, you're constantly reacting instead of working intentionally. Instead of finishing things, they carry forward. At a certain point, it starts to stack up because now it's not just one task, it's a pattern. This is what it actually looks like in real life. You get through your day, but still feel like you didn't get enough done. Not because you weren't working, but because your work never fully closes. Or you move from one task to another without a clear sense of priority. By the end of the day, everything feels unfinished. Or you're constantly reacting, answering messages, handling interruptions without much control over your time. As that continues, it creates a level of pressure that doesn't fully go away. Nothing really resets. And at this point, everything feels heavier. Even simple responsibilities take more effort than they should. And most people try to fix this by working harder instead of adjusting how their work is structured. Once you start to see that pattern, the next question becomes, where is this actually breaking down? It usually doesn't happen all at once. It shows up in specific areas, often in ways you don't immediately connect. And none of it feels extreme, but it keeps repeating. The pattern is the signal. So as we go through the next part, pay attention to which one feels the most familiar to you. The first is workload and capacity. For some people, it starts with workload. There's simply more to do than your time and energy can support. Even when you stay productive, it still feels like you're behind. And what makes this frustrating is you're not wasting time, you're working, but the workload never fully clears. As that continues, your energy drops, which makes everything else harder to manage. The second is control and boundaries. Once your energy drops like that, it becomes harder to stay in control. Expectations shift. Interruptions increase. Your ability to set limits starts to weaken. And instead of deciding what to work on, you start reacting to what shows up. When your time is constantly being pulled in different directions, it becomes harder to stay focused on what actually matters. The third is clarity and direction. You're not always sure what to prioritize next. You second guess decisions, and even simple choices start to take more effort than they should. your work becomes more reactive than intentional. When direction isn't clear, effort increases, but progress doesn't. And when that keeps happening, it usually points to something deeper, how your work is actually organized. That's where systems and structure start to matter. Tasks feel scattered, workflows aren't consistent, small inefficiencies slow everything down, and what should be simple starts to feel unnecessarily difficult. At a certain point, it's not just the workload anymore, it's how hard it is to move through it. And when everything starts to feel harder to manage, recovery becomes the missing piece. You finish your workday, but don't fully reset from it. Stress carries forward, fatigue builds, your energy never fully comes back, nothing really clears. That's where the cycle reinforces itself. And the important part is, you don't need all 5 of these to be off. Even one of them can start creating strain, which then affects everything else. This is where most people go in the wrong direction. When work feels overwhelming, the instinct is to push harder, work more, stay disciplined, try to keep up. And sometimes that does work for a little while. But then the same pressure shows up again. What doesn't get noticed is this. The structure isn't changing. The strain is just being carried forward. Instead of making work easier, it becomes more demanding. Because this isn't about effort, it's about how your work is designed. And when that's off, working harder doesn't fix it, it just reinforces it. Once that pattern keeps repeating, this is where it turns into something bigger. It's no longer just about being busy. Your energy never fully recovers. It carries forward from one day into the next and into the next and into the next. And as that continues, it changes how your work actually feels. Tasks take more effort. Focus becomes harder to maintain. Consistency starts to break down. This is where it shifts. Burnout isn't just about doing too much. It's about sustaining pressure without recovery. When your work structure isn't supporting you, that pressure doesn't go away. It builds. Eventually, it's not just your work that feels difficult. It's staying consistent at all. And this is exactly why most people don't catch it early. When you're in the middle of it, you just feel the effects, not the structure behind it. It just feels like you're busy, behind, or constantly trying to keep up. By the time you notice it, it's already been building. That's where having a way to step back and actually see how your work is structured makes the difference. Because once you see where the pressure is coming from, where your workload is misaligned, and what's not supporting your performance, you're not guessing anymore. This is where a structured self-assessment comes in, something that helps you step back and actually see how this is working in your own life. And that's exactly what the Occupational Wellness Audit is designed to do. It turns something that feels unclear into something you can actually see. If you want to go through it for yourself, it's available on the Great Discovery platform. I've linked it in the description so you can find it easily, and I'll also put it in the pinned comment. And in the next video, we're going to look at another area that might be affecting you in a completely different way, but is just as important when it comes to staying consistent and avoiding burnout. I'll see you in that one.